Good afternoon, everyone. We are here waiting for the press conference to begin. This is Jason Anthony from his studios from Brooklyn. We just witnessed the MTA board passing the Alex Partners Transformation Plan, all with the extension of David Jones, but we don't know who else voted in favor or against the plan. And of course, Chief Financial Officer of the MTA, Bob Ferran, let inform us of potentially two rounds of fare increases in 2021 and 2023 of 4% each. So that means 8% in 4 years. One question the question of the day is, and you can post your comments below, is will the New York City subway and MTA bus and New York City bus will get to $4? Yes or no? Please don't hesitate to post your comments below while we wait for the usual press conference between the MTA officials and the press. At this time, we're not at MTA headquarters like we usually do every month. So we're gonna do um, gonna do it pretty quickly, and we have been tweeting out some reactions while the media is paying attention to Robert Samuel Mueller III testimony before Congress that is airing in every single local network. The time right now is 1:27. We're still waiting for the press conference to begin. It's 1:35. Let's go to the press conference.
The Alex transformation plan, which was approved by a 10-1, 10-4, one against one abstention. I think the work that Alex Partners has done is incredibly important and valuable. I think the blueprint they've created will help achieve three goals. One is improving customer service. Secondly, making us a more effective and cost-effective organization. And three, a significant reduction in operating costs. With that, I'm happy to take your questions. No questions. Dana.
Dana.
What I don't understand is several board members describe this as a blueprint, a roadmap, a draft, a work in progress. Everything is theoretically, or most things in it are subject to amendment. So like what exactly did the board vote on today, and why did it bother voting on something so, up in the air?
Well, I don't think it's up in the air. First, we had a statutory obligation to approve the plan by July 30th. We did that today. Point one. Point two, Alex Partners called it a blueprint. I think that's a correct characterization of the plan and the recommendations. I think you've heard unanimity on the board, which I share, that is a blueprint. And of course, a blueprint for an organization, and it's a blueprint that was created because of a statutory requirement that was created, was put together in basically 90 days. So a blueprint for an organization with $17 billion of expense and $17 billion of revenue and 70,000 plus employees, of course it's going to change over time. And there's a chief transformation officer that we are searching for. That is also a statutory requirement. I think that Alex Partners' work was important and valuable in terms of establishing a blueprint. I think importantly, we're going to report to the board and the public regularly. As I said, I would be surprised if not at every board meeting over the next year or two there's going to be significant discussion about transformation and reform. And lastly, you heard from Bob Florin, CEO, confidence about the $350 million in cuts in 2020, and the same degree of confidence about the $370 million to $530 million cost-cutting range from Alex Partners.
But which elements in the blueprint that aren't also statutorily required do you consider binding thanks to today's vote? Or is all of it up in the air?
No, it's not a fair characterization. A blueprint was approved today, overwhelming vote from the board. The blueprint is the plan. The recommendations are the plan. Some of those naturally over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months will change. It would be surprising if that weren't the case. Alex's characterization of blueprint is exactly the term and the approach that I think most people on the board have, and it would be shocking and foolhardy to expect that there wouldn't be any changes.
One last question. Do you think that the statute would have allowed the board to reject the plan today?
Of course. Marcia.
Announced today an ambitious plan to reduce the homeless problem on the subways. I wonder how you think you can do that when the main organization that's supposed to be helping with outreach of the Fowler residents in B or C has been found by an audit not to be doing its job. What are you going to do?
Well, look, I
And how do
think,
you achieve it?
I think the, first of all, the audit report and the Inspector General's, ongoing review, I think is, important. Those results are shocking and disappointing. The other, empirical data point that I think is important is that despite the fact we're spending a significant amount of money on helping the homeless on the subways, obviously the numbers suggest that effort has not been successful. We need to take a look at the social service vendors that we use for this important service. I think the inclusion for the first time of State Office of OTDA, which is the regulator of homeless services for municipalities and governments around the state, is very important. We met with the commissioner in the last week or so. This is an effort that Ronnie Hickam is going to be responsible for, which is a sign of how important we believe this is. We're going to be spending more money on it. And I think the other thing that's important is I think too often in the past, this homeless issue has gotten focus when cold weather has begun to set in, and we're doing this obviously, after following a bunch of 190-degree days, and we're getting ahead of it. I expect that the plan that's put together will have a significant impact on the homeless issue in the subways.
If I could just do a follow-up.
Please.
When you talk to riders, the successes that you've had with the subway action plan that's forward.
Marsha Kramer's there.
About the homeless, that's what they talk about. So if you could talk directly to riders, could you tell them what they can expect in terms of what movement you plan to make in terms of making them feel safer and if the homeless are not on the subway?
Well, look, I'm a daily rider of the subways. So is everybody in my family, and like everybody in the room, family and friends.
Almost everybody in the room.
Clearly, the homeless situation on the subways, it's unacceptable. It's significantly greater. It would appear from the anecdotal point of view of a rider. The data supports that. The first thing we're focused on is obviously the human and social service needs of this population, which is not being served well by being allowed to live in the subways. Second, Andy Byford has, and these are words that resonate with me both as MTA chairman and CEO, but also as a rider. Customers are entitled to a clean, safe, and secure environment, and an environment that feels clean, safe, and secure. The emotionally disturbed percentage of the homeless obviously is contrary to that, to that goal. They deserve a suitable place to live. That's why bringing OTDA into the equation is important, and working with New York City Transit, Andy Byford and his team, MTA Police, obviously the NYPD, social service agencies. We believe we're going to be able to make a demonstrable reduction in this important issue. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, in recent weeks and months, the governor has been making a big issue of this. We have board members calling for more police. The MTA is distributing out of context data on the number of delays caused by homeless people. Do you think?
Out of context.
Well, I mean, just numbers on those delays I asked for. Can you contextualize this with total delays? You think something like that seems like it's a relatively small number. Are you kind of worried that, and at the same time, the people you're paying to, provide care for these people are not doing their job? Is that morally problematic to you, that there's these calls for police, there's this distributing of data that's kind of building into the idea that these people are a problem in the subway?
So two things. One is, I'll note the principle of save seconds, right? Got my armband right here someplace. Is that small things matter, right? And having conductors take a couple of seconds here and a couple of seconds there when you multiply it by the number of trains. So save seconds is built on small incremental change. Building upon the subway action plan led to last month's on-time performance of 81.5%. So I reject the premise that a small impact, whether homeless people's impact on the system is small, medium-sized, or large, doesn't matter. These small things matter. Two, do I have moral qualms about it? I do, but the moral qualms go this way. I don't think we're doing the homeless a service or the public a service in this public square, which is what the subways are, by allowing people who are, in many cases, obviously not a psychologist, not a medical doctor, but are suffering from emotional issues and in many cases medical issues. No one's doing them a favor by allowing them to live in the subways. And bringing OTDA and social service agencies that are effective into the equation is going to benefit not only the homeless, but also every rider, including on-time performance to the extent the homeless delay things. So that's my view. But
Andy might be able to answer this as well. I want to know more
thanks for the
details.
expression of confidence.
But I want to know more details about the ATS problems that we had Friday. I think a lot of us are very confused as to the cause of that. Andy pointed out that it was a third-party vendor issue.
Brilliant!
That could be Siemens or Oracle. You mentioned Oracle today. I'm just confused as to who was responsible for Friday's issue, as far as you know. Who was responsible for the issue on July 6th with the line of code, and who is responsible for a lot of these issues that have revealed holes in your systems dating back at least a year.
Okay, well, let me just start with just a general comment. Ultimately, who is accountable? I am, because I provide customer service to my customers, 8 million riders a day between the buses and the subways. So ultimately, I don't shirk from that responsibility. That's why I said at the transit committee, I feel very badly about this. We let our customers down on Friday. We let them down on the 6th because, regardless of the key players involved, and I'll come on to that to answer your question, irrespective of the key players, bottom line is we didn't get people from A to B, and that's not right. So I felt badly about it. That's why I apologize for it. So what I was saying, I'm happy to answer the question to clarify the point you made, because these things are never just simple. There are a number of key players. There's obviously New York City Transit, because we are the people, our controllers are moving the trains, our IT gives us support. The other key players, there's Siemens, who are the system provider for ATS. So they provide the system, the automatic train supervision system. And that runs on software that is provided by Oracle. So let's look at the two incidents then. On the 6th of July, that incident was caused by a rogue piece of code. So there was a rogue character within the code, and it's the nature of computers, I guess, that one rogue piece of code can cause problems. So we have subsequently gone back with IT. What happened was, working with our supplier, what they do is go through the logs. They literally look through the logs and look for inconsistencies or illogicalities within the logs. And what they identified after pouring through them was there was this one rogue character, which was subsequently fixed with a patch. Who wrote that code? My guess is it was Oracle. I've looked to my head of IT for that. The fact that Oracle provide the software, that would have been. We'll confirm that. One thing I should stress: we're not playing a blame game here. What we're saying is giving you the facts. Here are the key players. We will get to the bottom of exactly accountabilities via the separate investigation that we've launched with the IG. Because to your point about incidents over time, we want to look at this in the round. We really are deadly serious about improving service, which is how, by the way, we got to 81.5%. Fast forwarding to the 19th of July, that was separate from the incident that occurred on the 6th. So the patch that was applied on the 6th was not at fault. That was one of my first questions, actually. Is this related? The answer is no. Simply, no, it was not. But it was another coding issue that caused both the primary and the backup servers to crash. And although we have a backup procedure, which we enacted, which is to send the rail control center dispatchers to the old towers, which still exist, it was quicker actually to reboot the servers. That's what we did. So both the primary and the secondary were rebooted. That meant that we got service back, or rather we got the visuals on the signals back. The trains stayed on juice, they stayed on air conditioning, they stayed on lighting, and we progressively moved the trains up and we got going again. So what we now need to do, and that was my first priority. Second priority was understand what caused it. I now understand that better. But the third element of this is to now work with the IG and with Oracle and with Siemens and IT and our own people within subways to once and for all get to the bottom and make sure there are no more issues, coding issues lurking out there.
And then there are other things that make people feel afraid, like certain videos that understandably go viral where things are falling down. You're getting washed off your feet by water. You're walking with like a potato sack race to get out of the subway station. Things on the overheads are falling down. It could kill people. Is this a tipping point where people are upset about certain things like delays and the homeless, which you call things that can be looked at, and something that they fear for their safety? What's your reaction?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a very safe system. We move 8 million people a day, and demonstrably, it is a safe system because our safety statistics show that. But having said that, I do understand that any incident and any associated viral video is upsetting to people. It's upsetting to me. We've taken this issue of items falling off the elevated structures very seriously. And only on Monday at the Transit Committee, I announced that we're now underway with a pilot on a netting system to arrest anything that falls off the structure. But I did make the point that that's the goaltender, if you like. The better solution is prevention rather than cure. So in addition to that, we put huge effort into housekeeping on the elevated section to stop that happening in the first place. Point two, well, for issues like you mentioned the flooding video, just remember the root cause of that was an unacceptable and inexplicable in many ways failure on the part of a adjacent developer who is building a skyscraper, who for some inexplicable reason, removed a pump just when that pump was required. That caused water to build up, but intolerable pressure on a hoarding, a properly constructed hoarding, but intolerable pressure on it that caused that hoarding to fail. But I do understand that such things do give people concern. So that's one of the reasons we put so much effort into checking our stations, into making sure that things like this don't occur, and when they do, getting to the root cause of them and taking action.
Just to ask, on an emotional level for you, having been in London or being places where you don't see these videos surface, and to have somebody say this is embarrassing as from an optics or a publicity standpoint. Is there anything you could say about that? That people say they travel and they don't see these kinds of things, yet it happens in New York City where they would hope it would not.
Well, as you know, I've worked across the globe, and I can assure you that incidents happen, videos surface in other systems as well. But at the end of the day, I'm going to turn the question around in a way. This is why we need Fast Forward. This is why we need the huge investment that the governor and the legislature have now secured, so that we really can give New York a system of which it can be rightly proud, and that's within our grasp.
One thing I'd add is I want to applaud Attorney General James for the decision to investigate that incident, because the removal of the pump was both life-endangering and was intentional, and hopefully the contractor and the developer will be held accountable. Please.
Chairman, during the public comment section, a number of people expressed concern that adopting the transformation plan will somehow impact the success of Fast Forward. Can you speak to that and then let them know, from such a great report, how to address their concern?
Yeah, I think quite the contrary. I think that the blueprint that was approved today, first of all, legislatively required. It was a condition of the MTA getting Central Business District tolling, as well as the two other revenue sources, which aggregate $25 billion in total. That is a huge contribution to the new capital plan, on which Fast Forward at New York City Transit, as well as work at the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, is predicated. Point three would be the focus on customers, the focus on making a more effective and cost-effective organization, and taking out between $370 and $530 million of expense is also facilitates and makes Fast Forward an investment in New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North more likely to occur. I think all positive. Yes, please.
Pat, some of the things Alex Gartners did not mention in the transformation report, and it came out in the Manhattan Institute commentary this week, some cost and revenue suggestions in areas like materials costs, commercially driven revenue, and also employee workflows. What confidence do you have that a transformed MTA can address those areas of concern?
Look, I think Manhattan Institute is additive to the Alex Partners in the following sense. They looked at our addressable spend, which is kind of things that can be controlled in this process, about $10 billion. Alex looked at $1 billion of it, so about 10%, which is a pretty good work product in the 90 days available. And they concluded that the expense savings is the $370 to $530 million range. It is unquestionably the case that as we get deeper into this and look at the other 80–90% of addressable spend, that there will be significant more opportunities for efficiencies and cost savings. I think the work that Manhattan Institute and Nicole Gelinas and others have done is important. I read all their stuff, as do a lot of my colleagues here. David.
Yeah, Pat. Couple things. One on the comptroller's audit yesterday regarding BRC Bowery Residence Committee. I'm just hoping to get your reaction to that. Whether you were disappointed, shocked, upset.
Oh, look, it's appalling and it's unacceptable. We pay them a lot of money. They're a well-regarded organization, I'm told, but not answering the knocks when a homeless knock and not coming out and having conversations with them and providing services is appalling and not acceptable.
Understood. And then on the public comment, there were a lot of concerns expressed during the public comment period about the alleged lack of public input in the Alex Partners plans development. So I'm wondering if you could talk about a little bit about moving forward, what sorts of public input will be collected and how.
So a couple of things. One is we created a email address, transformation@mtahq.org. The public's going to have the ability to provide comments, ideas, criticisms, compliments, probably rarely, going forward. As I mentioned, I expect that every board meeting over the next year or two, there's going to be a substantive discussion of where are we on the transformation plan. There'll be a transformation group of the board. There'll be a chief transformation officer hired later this year. We're in the middle of the search. I think there's going to be public comment. Alex sat down with civic advocates, many of them in the room here. That discussion will continue. And as I said, and as my colleagues on the board said, this is a blueprint. Which means there's going to be lots of opportunity for the public commenting. Why don't you think about this? Why don't you think about that? I think there will be a full discussion in public as to the progress and challenges and changes of the reform plan. Alfonso.
Hi. A couple of questions regarding railroad labor. Firstly, you heard from Commissioner Tessitore, and I had heard from other union officials looking for some assurance that these job cuts would not affect represented labor. It's not clear why they would, if they're going to be the effect of this consolidation. But so far, you and the MTA have not given that assurance. You haven't taken it off the table. Can I ask you why?
Yeah, sure. The answer is, I said today, and I think our CFO said today, our financial condition is dire. That continues to be the case. Bob reported that we have confidence in the $350 million of cuts for next year. Alex said, and I believe this, that they have confidence in the numbers that they put out there. The challenge and the deficits that we face are greater than those numbers. We can't give that assurance. I will give this assurance with respect to our union brothers and sisters and their representatives. One of the things we took off the table, not change, no cuts to safety or security. Most of the cuts are going to be in combining administrative functions. The cuts that may occur with respect to represented members are likely in a range that would be covered by attrition. That's not true necessarily with respect to the administrative groups, but taking it off the table would be misleading and just can't do that.
Related, you talked about employee availability and that being a big driver of overtime and the need to address that. How do you address that? I mean, if what you're talking about is approved holidays, vacation, how do you reduce that? Is it a matter of in collective bargaining potentially reducing how much
Well,
vacation time
I think
workers
there's a
get?
couple of things. Obviously, vacation days that are negotiated in the contract, God bless you for those who speak, are what they are. Sick days, for instance, are about 14, on average, 14 days per employee. There are other, the availability numbers on average, as I said today, are between 198 and 206 days per employee. It varies per agency, but not substantially, which is not surprising when we're in an environment with pattern bargaining. At those numbers, that's 40 weeks of 40 weeks a year. How do you address it? I think there are two things. One is better focus by management on those issues that are controllable. Some of the impacts of average available days can be managed. And then the second question, while my policy is and remains, I'm not going to comment on the specifics of collective bargaining agreements in any case. I think that the data, which I mentioned today, because to me it was it hasn't, as far as I know, been discussed at the board level in public in a long time, if ever. And the numbers are so significant and have such an impact on the overtime number that I thought bringing focus to it was the right thing to do. We're going to continue to analyze and dissect the overtime numbers in the weeks ahead, and I think it's a management issue, Alfonso, and it's also a negotiating issue. Please.
I'm sorry, Chairman Foy, and maybe this is a President Byford question, but I would be curious to know.
Sounds like a Byford question.
Okay. I would be curious to know of the fare evaders on a given day, what percentage would be estimated?
I wonder why Pat Foy is evading to.
I don't know. Why don't we come back on that? I just don't know off the top. Emma.
Hello. So I want to ask about subway elevators. It comes up at every board meeting, and honestly, it's sort of heartbreaking to keep hearing these stories. And today, one of the
And it touches personally to you, Emma, on 181st
that didn't happen.
on
What's the
the A.
status of that list? And I have a small follow-up.
Sure. The 50 ADA stations list is nearly complete. It involves, and actually, Andy, why don't you talk, please, if you would, about the extraordinary community outreach input.
Okay, so yes, as the chairman said, the list is
Super.
just for those of you who don't know, how did we put that list together? To a certain extent, there were certain parameters, because if you want to achieve, which we do, no more than 2 stops away from an accessible station within 5 years, which we can. Obviously, you've got to pick from a finite number of stations in order to fill the gaps. So we've looked, though, in addition to filling the gaps, and we only need 36 more stations to do that. We looked at things like local demographics. Are there any hospitals around there? We look at terminized stations. We look at intersection stations, places where you can make connections. We look at demographics such as, are there senior homes in the vicinity? Is there a bus terminal? So there are a raft of decision criteria that we apply to choosing what those stations would be. But in the same way that we're going out into the community to ask, what do you want from your bus redesign? Being customer-led means also asking the disabled community, well, where do you want those stations to be? So we ran a workshop in this very room, at which we had advocacy groups. We had individual members of the public. Chris, I think you were here, right? So we had people in here, and we put up the lists to say, right, for this part of Brooklyn, it needs to be one of these 5 stations. And here are the decision criteria. Here are the ins and outs, the numbers of customers using those stations. Here are some other factors, that there's a bus interchange or there's a senior home, as I just described. And the community helped us populate that list. We're just running final checks on that list right now, and that will be part of our capital plan. And I was encouraged by what I heard this morning about potentially even using an earlier capital plan, the existing one, to expedite that work.
And when will the
That I thought was the news today, right? You've had discussion, Commissioner Schwartz, Commissioner Mahika, Commissioner Feinberg, and me, and we've been talking, and I think have some interesting ideas among the four of us about how to accelerate the ADA program. I'm going to kind of leave it there, but I thought that was
of course, because you don't want to be
by,
like the bad guys with
today,
the
I think
disability
important,
folks.
discussion.
When would the list be available?
Shortly.
Like August?
Shortly.
And then my second part of the question.
Oh, come on, Patrick Foy.
Before, but I was just at the station on the Upper West Side with my son in a stroller, and you know, I have to say I didn't use the like standing benches that were used at that renovated station. And so, how do you justify these stations that have been renovated, especially when it comes to aesthetics, and there's no elevator?
Look, the enhanced ESI, Enhanced Station Initiatives, had a particular pot of money. It did not have enough to do ADA elevators. I think going forward, we're going to bring a prism of every time we do work like that, whether it's legally required or not, we're going to make it accessible. There is a fundamental principle of fast forward, and a fundamental principle of the new capital plan is going to be significant investment in increasing accessibility at New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North, all three agencies. And lastly, the discussion today about accelerating the investment even before the new capital plan, I think was important, and an indication of the board's commitment and the MTA's commitment to do more quicker. Well,
I just wondering, given the quite aggressive tone the governor has taken, some of his colleagues have taken with the MTA the last year or more, given the hiring freeze and now this enormous reorganization, which is going to shift people around, switch roles and responsibilities, and cut up to 2,700 jobs. Are you concerned there could be a brain drain at the MTA and that people who are considering coming here might not answer coming, but people who are here are considering leaving?
Well, look, we live in a world where the scarce commodity is not money, it's talent. Anybody who runs a sizable organization is focused on that. I take comfort in the fact, I don't know whether Sarah Meyer's in the room, and Alex Elagudu's in the room, and a woman named Adori Valdivia, and lots of other people have come here. Not to be pejorative, but many of them are millennials, don't hold that against them. And I think we're hiring lots of Matt Maxion, Tim Minton, who may or may not be a millennial. There's lots of people who are really talented people who have come here. I think that people are excited by the mission. Obviously, anytime there's change, there's going to be a certain amount of turmoil and people coming and going. I have a high degree of confidence in our ability to attract and retain really talented people. The 70,000 plus people who work here, you know, Andy's made the point that, for instance, on the save seconds and the speed unit work that New York City Transit has done, a lot of the ideas have come from subway operators and conductors. That, and the same thing with respect to bus redesign, comments from bus operators. There's an incredible amount of talent that works here already, incredible amount of talent that's been retained. It's a major challenge, but it is for any organization.
Just to take Alex Gordon as an example, he's the accessibility officer for New York City Transit.
Yep.
New York calls for an accessibility officer for the MTA system-wide. So would Alex be applying for a system-wide job, or would he be working for somebody else? Like, how does that fit together?
I would expect Alex to apply, but I'm not, you know, that's a personal choice on, I don't think Andy would want him to, but I cited Alex as one of the talented people who's joined here, and I think he's made a significant contribution, and I hope he does here for a long period of time to come.
Are you saying that the actual position itself of New York City Transit wouldn't exist under the rule?
No, I didn't say that at all. I thought the question you asked was, might he apply for the Chief Accessibility Officer? And I'll leave that up to Alex, but certainly he's a talented individual who's made contributions, and I'm not going to talk about personnel beyond that. Mr. Pelican. New Jersey. Yeah, yeah. Got it.
This is a living document. Oh, this is a living document. We're going to fix it down the line. What is the process to fix it down the line if a year from now people go, moving the engineers was a bad idea? Is this another board vote? Is it a unilateral decision on your part?
I think it's going to depend. I don't accept the premise of the question in the following sense. There's going to be an analysis and thought and a plan for each of these recommendations and sub-recommendations. And the chief transformation officer who we're in the process of searching for is obviously going to be involved in that. There's going to be a board transformation committee. Ronnie and I and Bob Fornan and Jano and Andy and Phil and Kathy and all our colleagues throughout the MTA are going to be involved. And if, for instance, one of the recommendations, recommendation 24, we determine isn't to be a good idea, or that it ought to be phased in a different way, or it ought to be staged differently, or the approach ought to be changed, it'll get changed. I told you today we're going to come back to the board. Literally, I expect this is going to be discussed every month. If some of the changes require the expenditure of money or amended contracts and they require board approval, we'll take it back. If board approval isn't required and it's material, we'll discuss it with the board and public, and the public will have an opportunity to weigh in. That's the process.
I just have one follow-up. People I spoke to and people on the board were saying that they were concerned about taking engineers out of the operations from the trans agencies. And is that an overblown concern, or is
I think it's overblown, but people have expressed concerns about a number of them. We're going to consider all those things. Engineering talent's going to be left in the operating agencies, of course, because they can't run the railroads without it. Where you draw the line, I think, is the question. And we're going to look at each of those things. And as we said today, it's a blueprint with final decisions to come. Where do we want to go? Back, Dan.
I'm going to ask this question in the spirit of this being a blueprint, a living document, those terms you've heard. Mr. Finley earlier said, when I was asked about the fast forward plan and some of those key signal elevator work, he ultimately came down to saying we'll have those conversations. We'll have to get at the managerial level and up to the chief transformation officer about what gets done under the central planning. So I asked that because I wanted to ask you, what guardrails can you put in place where if you consolidate that capital planning into a central authority, that it'll be insulated from a political, financial decision of saying, well, maybe we can't do those signals because, Metro North needs something, or we can't do that state, we can't put an elevator at that station because Long Island Railroad needs the station. How are you going to balance what's critical needs for the mass of people who ride the subway versus something on the commuter rails that might be politically, juiced versus necessary?
So, Dan, a couple of things. One is I think your question may include a unspoken premise, which I think is wrong. The concentration of more capital projects in MTA capital construction, which I think under Jano's leadership is a far more effective and cost-effective organization, is not intended to address political issues. It's intended to build, and the world's changed. Point B, the world's changed because of the state passage of design and build, right? Design and build requires a different orientation and set of skills. It's intended to
something that Murray Bowden wanted.
We believe has a better chance of executing complicated projects, design build projects, and having that expertise. The allocation of capital question there's a twofold answer to it, of course. One is the statute, the state budget provides that was respectively congestion and pricing revenue, right? It's split 80%, 10%, 10%, 80 transit, 10% to each of the commuter rails. So the state legislature and the governor anticipated that. But the reason for capital construction taking more of the capital is the passage of design build, which really changes the world for the MTA. And also the fact we think we're going to get a better execution and better be able to stretch capital dollars. I believe both of those.
So you're saying, or perhaps a better way to ask, no risk to say new signals on the Lex line cut because bandwidth is too short in a centralized agency, or things take priority. You're saying
everything that's in plans and fast forward can and will be done?
Well, look, it's going to depend on the ultimate size of the capital plan, which I would expect, as Robert Mahika said at a board meeting a couple of months ago, is going to be in the, in the low 40s, which will be the highest capital plan ever. Obviously, resignaling is the single most important priority of New York City Transit, the single largest priority of Fast Forward, and the Fast Forward program is already working towards planning and designing for resignaling, and the results on the 7 train, where throughput and capacity and on-time performance has just skyrocketed, kind of speak for themselves. Dana.
What has changed in the past few weeks between when the governor's estimated the capital plan would be roughly 30 and today when you estimated it would be in the low 40s?
I don't think anything's changed. I think the governor was talking about the $25 billion in the capital plan, plus the assumption we're making about $7 billion of federal support, which is the amount in the 2015 to 2019 plan. And I think the state budget director, who's now happily an MTA board member, has spoken at the board and in a announcement that he issued in February or March before the state budget was adopted, that the capital plan was likely to be in the low 40s, which should be the highest ever.
So how do you account for the dissonance between those two numbers?
I think the governor wasn't counting. He was looking at state funding and wasn't counting the $7 billion from the federal government. Okay. Thanks a lot.
All right, folks, there you have it. Another MTA board meeting in the books. So, what's gonna happen? AlixPartners is going to, let's say, basically do the same thing that they did with PREPA back in 2016. But this time, there's going to be several nominations, like CFO, Central, CTO, that's a Chief Transformation Officer, who will be responding to the board. We don't know if Pat Foy will stay in his position. So basically the plan was passed 10-1-1. That means 10 in favor, 1 against, and the extension of board member David Jones. So we will have to wait until September to see the progress of this initiative. Because still, the mystery between AlixPartners and the MTA continues, despite the, let's say, the awareness that we created several weeks ago when we did the video of the mystery between AlixPartners and the MTA. And the recipe to cut down fare evasion that we are seeing now more visible signage in stations like J Street Metrotech or Whitehall Street, my home station at the Avenue Barclays Center, that you have now arrows on the floor telling passengers where to exit, where to enter, the consequences of doing fare evasion. Even I see it every time that I go to Staten Island and use the S40 bus. But even though on the S40 bus, you still see amounts of variation. Well, it is 2:20 in the afternoon. Now we have to digest what we learned today. And let's see what will happen in September. So thank you for joining us. And remember, the headlines of the day is Alex Partners' plan was approved, and Bob Baller's testimony will resume in a few minutes before Congress. So that being said, enjoy your hump day.